Actually, no notes. Good afternoon. Welcome to Signifus U, and this is a special edition. Yesterday in church, October 26th was Reformation Sunday, and next Sunday is All Saints Day. So it's a good time to talk about Martin Luther. And in the sermon, I felt, there's so many books on Luther and there's so much to say about him that it's really frustrating to try to do something with it on a Sunday morning service. You really need like an extended period of time. So I'm going to show you some slides and tell you about Luther, and I'm going to assume you don't know anything about Luther. Okay, so we'll start right there. Okay, so here we go. Martin Luther and the Reformation. And the video was mostly concentrated on the screen up here. So, all right, the Reformation. Okay, what date do we use? Ready? Very important. 1517 to 1618. That's a date you want to memorize. 1617 to 1618. It's about a 100-year period. And it's related to the Renaissance. Okay? So the Renaissance is going on in northern Italy, and the Reformation, they're like tandem movements. And what's the battle cry or the slogan of the Reformation, of the Renaissance and the Reformation? Ad fontes. Okay, what's that phrase again? Ad fontes. It's Latin. It means back to the fountainhead. So what does that mean? Instead of believing experts and scholars and their opinions on things and reading their books, you read the primary sources. And what does Cicero say? What does Tacitus say? What does Aristotle say? You read the original, don't read some expert commenting on what they think. Now, is that a good philosophy in life? It's outstanding, right? Most people, where do you get your news from? Oh, I watch Fox or I watch CNN or whatever, and we listen to the experts render their opinions. Well, who are they, right? So what do you want to do? Read the original sources. I like C-SPAN. You ever watch C-SPAN before? What is it? They have cameras. They show what's going on in Congress or what's going on in some hearings or something, and you can see for yourself and make up your own mind. That's what the Reformation and the Renaissance are all about. Ad fontes. Check out the original sources. So very important. So keep that in mind, all right? And Patrick made this point, right? The Reformation, where does it come from? It's Reformation. Reformation. Was Martin Luther... did he start his own religion or start his own? The answer is no. His goal in life, he loves the church. Okay, the church, the universal church. He loves the church. And what does he want to do? He wants to reformat the hard drive. Right? Reform. He wanted to have a council where scholars and important church leaders got together and they debated and discussed these points. He thought that corruption had crept in roughly for about 600 or 700 years. So the different popes come along, different issues and different problems arise, and then theologians come up with it, and so the pope speaks ex cathedra, and next thing you know, you have this huge body of teaching that doesn't really conform to what the Bible has to say about it. So Luther starts reading the Bible ad fontes, and he sees there's a gap between what the Catholic Church, medieval Roman Catholic Church, is doing and what the Bible says. That gap is what he's very concerned with. And he wants to go reform it. He wants to go back to the beginning and reform the medieval Roman Catholic Church. Again, he's not out to start his own religion. Extremely important, okay? So the name is a very important thing. And this is a woodcut of Martin Luther. What does this mean? Martin Luther, I'll talk about the printing industry in a couple of moments. He was a celebrity. Right? A pop culture hero in German-speaking territories. So normal people would have a picture like this maybe hanging up in their little shack or something, peasants would. And of course, what's the other thing in there? It's Christ on the cross. Okay, so Luther believes ad fontes. What's the gospel again? The death, burial, resurrection of Christ. It's not his philosophy or his teaching. In fact, what does he tell us over and over again? Don't call yourself Lutheran, call yourself evangelical or gospel preachers, gospel talkers. That's who you are. Christian, we're Christian, right? What am I? I'm a Christian first, a Protestant second, and a Lutheran third. Okay? So that's a really good thing to do. We believe in the gospel, the death, burial, resurrection of Christ. That's what it's all about. So here the cross on there is to remind you what the gospel is. Now, what dates do we have here? We have a bunch of dates here today, so that's good because that's how you learn history, dates, right? So Luther's born in 1483 and he dies in 1546. Okay, so that's the time window we're talking about. Now, this is what Luther's Germany looked like, right? And these are some of the towns that we're going to be talking about. Wittenberg, it means White Mountain. He was a professor there at Wittenberg University in Old Testament. Okay, what does he teach? Old Testament. Okay, Old Testament guy. And Eisleben is where he's born and where he died. It's very strange. He was born in Eisleben, and 2 weeks before he died, he's 63 years old, he goes to settle a dispute, and he had a heart attack and he died in the same town that he was born in. Very strange thing. Worms, right? It's not Worms, it's Worms, the Diet of Worms, the Wurtemberg Castle, Erfurt, that's where he went to university, and Augsburg, Germany. We'll talk about all these places as we go along today. When you do history, it's always good to have the map set in front of you, right? Where does this take place? It doesn't take place over in Connecticut or out in Missouri somewhere. It takes place in Germany. What's this? This is Germany during Luther's lifetime. Now, when was Germany united? 1871. So Germany's problem is that for centuries, since when? 1254, it's a little patchwork of over 300 duchies and principalities. So Kaiser Wilhelm in 1914, in his speech declaring war on the Allies, says, a united Germany has never been defeated in time of war. So a German problem, Germans fear two things. People coming from the east and overrunning our country, right? We worry about Mexicans and Central coming here to our country. Germans have this thing about Eastern people coming to overrun them. And they have a thing where they get beaten up by the French or the Spanish Habsburgs for centuries. So they believe if they're unified, they can be strong, and German nationalism is rooted in the idea of we're a united country to keep away the enemies, right? We're surrounded by enemies. So Luther in Germany's time, it's this patchwork of little principalities, and they were part of the Holy Roman Empire. What does Voltaire say? The Holy Roman Empire is not holy, it's not Roman, it's not an empire, right? So it's pretty good. It's pretty good, you know. So they're part of the Holy Roman Empire, and they have 7 electors. And who are they? They're kind of like, we have electors in our presidential system, you know, where, you know, electors vote for the president. Well, electors are archbishops and princes from this territory, German-speaking lands, and they have the power to vote and elect the next Holy Roman Emperor. So in other words, there's a power politics dimension going on here. What do common German peasants have to say about that? Nothing, right? Because in a monarchy, you're a subject, and you just you're owned by the duke or prince. When Germans started coming to this country in the 1840s, you had to pay your duke or baron a fee in order to leave their particular domain. It's like an exit tax. Actually, there are people that have proposed this for people who live in New York that move out of state. They want you to pay an exit fee in order to leave New York. This is like an old European thing, right? That's why we left that mess, right? The old world order. So this is Martin Luther. And is this what Martin Luther looked like? The answer is yes, it is. Why? Lucas Cranach the Elder, who was a Renaissance artist, what kind of artist? Renaissance. Renaissance artists believe not in ideal types, but they want to draw you the way you really look, right? So if you have like a weird nose, they like the weird nose. If you have like a mole on your face, they want to have the mole. If if you're a little bit on the rotund side, they make you look fat, right? So they're interested in the human body the way it really looks, not the way it should look like a Greek god or something, but the way that people really are. So it's like hyper-realistic painting. And Lucas Cranach was a famous artist, and he had a shop, like a produced artwork. he lived right down the block from Martin Luther. So we have pictures of painting, contemporary paintings of Luther, who through his entire life. So that's what he looked like, right? And what's that on his head? Is he maybe like a guardian angel, like Curtis Lewa or something? It's like, is that a beret or something? No, this means he's a doctor of theology. So when you have your picture taken, or your portrait, you sit there and you see this and go, oh, he's an important person, doctor of theology. And what is he wearing? Like a fur coat, right?
Yeah.
Why? They don't have indoor heating like we do, so they live in like castles and big old stone buildings, and one room in the castle might be heated. So you're walking around, basically it's cold. We went to Germany in December, but maybe 10 years ago. I've never been so cold in my entire life. It's like a kind of a humid cold, and it like gets in your bones and you can't get warmed up. It's a very strange thing. So you wear layers of clothing, right? So you have like a fur coat under the layers of coat in order to stay warm, right? So that's Germany, northern Germany. Who is he? He's a peasant. Okay, what does that mean? He's a non-aristocrat, right? Aristocrat, he's not an aristocratic person, so he's a normal person, in other words. He's an Augustinian hermit monk, right? There's a 12-hour lecture. When Luther became a monk in Erfurt is the name of this university town, there were 11 monasteries in the town. So he could have been a Franciscan, he could have been a Dominican, he could have been a Carmelite, but instead he picks the Augustinian hermit order. Now, is the Augustinian order sort of well known right now? Who's the name of the current pope anyway? What's his name? Pope Leo, right? Well, he is from Chicago, and guess what order he's a member of? The Augustinian order. So the Augustinian order, that's the same order that Luther belonged to. Very interesting, and they wear all black, right? That's and they're very rigorous. And he joined the order, and within a few years he was ordained a Roman Catholic priest. Why is that? Because he had an advanced education, which is rare. Most monks couldn't read and write, but he's a literate person who had a bachelor's degree and a master's degree. And he's made a professor at Wittenberg University in Saxony. So it's not Germany yet, it's called Saxony. Anglo-Saxon, Saxony, okay? And what is the core of Lutheran theology? The 5 solas, we'll talk about that toward the end. So this is what his ideas are. Now, why do you want to remember Martin Luther? 1517 and 2017, that's the 500th anniversary of the Protestant Reformation. So this year, it's the 508th anniversary, 508 years ago. And again, I talked about this during the sermon on Sunday. Most of my college students, their eyes glaze over. They can't stand history, they don't care about it, it's not relevant to them, it has nothing to do with them. So they're not aware of things. Like Franklin Roosevelt. He teaches the CIA, it's 4 miles away. That's where President Roosevelt lived. 32nd President of the United States. He died April 12, 1945. Do they know or care about that? No, they don't. It's ancient history that's not relevant to them. Do they care about the Great Depression? 1929, 1941? No, never heard of it, don't care about that. How about World War II? No, they're not familiar with that at all. Other than they know they don't like Nazis for some reason, but they don't know anything about Nazis, right? So it's a very strange thing. So this is a heavy lift to try to explain to people who is Martin Luther, right? And I applaud you for having the patience to sit here and listen to this, because most people they have no interest in this at all, right? But it's extremely important to know about Luther, and we'll talk about that as the lecture goes on. In church history, we'll do a whole class on this sometime, just a church history. If we use 33 AD for death, burial, resurrection of Christ, the church didn't just start at Pentecost Day and it remained unchanged over the centuries. Christianity spread into Northern Europe, right? Greece, then Northern Europe, then finally Scandinavia. And there were different movements within the church. 1054 is called the Great Schism. What does that mean? A cardinal was sent from Rome to Constantinople, the Byzantine Empire, and he excommunicated the Metropolitan of Constantinople. That's the Eastern Orthodox, like the Pope of Eastern Orthodox. He excommunicated him, and the Eastern Orthodox Metropolitan excommunicated the Pope at that time. So you have a split in Greek and Latin Christianity. Lutherans, we're on the Latin side, right? So Eastern Orthodox Christianity, do you know anybody who's Greek Orthodox, Russian Orthodox, Serbian Orthodox, Albanian, other? They're very interesting. It's like, what is this? They have like the weird beards, they have icons, they have incense. It's a very strange, they're Christian, but they're like a strange kind of Christianity, right? And of course, what do Orthodox people think? Orthodox people believe that they're the one true church, and that the Pope has to come to his senses and recant and repent and join the one true church, which is the Orthodox Church. Right? They believe this, honestly. So Luther was interested in Eastern Orthodoxy. I don't think he ever met an Eastern Orthodox priest, but he knew vaguely about it, and he wanted to know, what does non-Roman Catholic Christianity look like? I mean, honestly, the only thing you've ever known is the medieval Roman Catholic Church, and you say we want to reform it, well, what would that look like? What do we do on the other side of the Pope, in other words? So he's very interested in this. And also, I want to direct your attention to this date, 1378 to 1417. It's called a papal schism. What does that mean? During this time, they had 2 or 3 popes at the same time. And it's called the popes in Avignon, France. So politics plays a role. Is the Pope from Italy, or is he from France? And so the King of France basically abducted the Pope and moved him to southern France, Avignon Pope. So for about 100 years, you had 2 or 3 popes at the same time excommunicating each other. There's chaos, in other words. 100 years before Luther does the Reformation, the Catholic Church is not a united, monolithic thing that hasn't changed since the time of St. Peter. They had their own issues, okay? Very important. So the papal schism is going on. So this is sort of the background of Luther. And we'll do another whole course on this. There are over 250 different denominations in the United States. So what's a good thing to do? You say to yourself, well, where are your ancestors from? Well, they came from England and they were working class people. Then they're probably Methodist. Or we owned a lot of property, a lot of land in England, and we moved to Virginia. That means you're probably Anglican or Episcopalian. Or we came from northern Germany or Scandinavia, then you're probably Lutheran. Or we came from Scotland. Well, if you came from Scotland, you're probably Presbyterian. You see how that works? So when people came over here, I happened to be Lutheran, and I was baptized at Hazelrun Lutheran Church in 1955. And they came from Norway through Wisconsin and then ultimately pioneers in Minnesota. And the first thing they did is build the church. And what was the church? It was a Lutheran church, and they preached in Norwegian until 1945. So this is like 2 or 3 or 4 generations of people gathering as Lutherans, preaching in Norwegian. And they wondered why the English neighbors had nothing to do with them. Because it's in Norwegian. Why would you want to go to a church like that? So the idea of, in this church, we had preaching in German until around 1840. So if you came to St. Paul's Wurtemberg from 1870 to 1840, the service was in German, right? Very interesting. So there's where you came from has a big impact on what your religion is, right? For people that are Christian and take it seriously. All right, the Middle Ages, right? Okay, Martin Luther, I talked about this in the sermon, that 1500, okay, you put a flag right here, 1500. There's a before 1500 and there's an after 1500. This is why Luther is an important person. Luther has 1 foot in the Middle Ages and 1 foot in the modern world. He's a bridge that connects the Middle Ages to early modern European history. Very important. So 1500. All right, so what are some things that happened in the late Middle Ages? Well, 1492, what happened? Columbus sailed the ocean blue. So during Luther's lifetime, Columbus discovered America. And 1453, what happened? Johannes Gutenberg invents movable type, the printing industry, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. It's the information age. What else happened in 1453? The Turks took Constantinople. What does that mean? That's the home of the Byzantine Empire. The Eastern Orthodox religion was based in Constantinople from basically 36 AD to 1453, and the Turks took Constantinople. I cannot emphasize the shock. People in Western Europe were stunned. They thought it was what? The book of Revelation, the end of the world, and Muhammad is the Antichrist. They were terrified of this. And were the armies of Islam a danger to Western civilization? Yeah, until September 11, 1683, when the Turks were turned back at the gates of Vienna by two Polish kings, the winged hussars that rode down from the north and slaughtered the Turks at the gates of Vienna. We came this close. If they would have taken Vienna, Germany would have fallen over, and France, it would have been the end of, we would be Islamic right now, right? So up until 1683, that's fairly recently, Islam was a major threat to the Christian West, right? And I can't stress that enough. Okay, so he's got 1 foot in the Middle Ages, 1 foot in the modern world. Martin Luther, okay, these are his dates again, right? And this is Columbus's 4 voyages to the New World, right? They didn't know anything about the New World. Remember, how many continents are there prior to 1500? 3, which is what? Africa, Europe, and Asia. Shem, Ham, and Japheth, because the Bible says so. So they didn't know about North and South America. They didn't know about Antarctica. They didn't know about Australia, right? So they only knew about 3 of the 7 continents. So after 1500, all of a sudden you're like, wow, there's a whole world out there the Bible didn't say anything about. Very interesting. So again, Columbus is very important. Okay, who is this? Gutenberg invents movable type. I cannot stress the importance of this. Without the printing press, there's no Reformation. The printing press is basically, it's sort of like a TikTok or the internet. It's the way of normal people getting the word out. You don't have to be a big multinational corporation to post a TikTok video. It could be you in your garage and a cell phone. That's what printing did. How did they do books before this? Well, monks in a scriptorium would hand copy books. Hand copy. How long would it take you to copy the Holy Bible? 767,000 words. Oh, it might take you, if you took a ballpoint pen and notebook paper and started copying the Bible, it might take you maybe a year and a half, 2 years, right? Well, except they didn't just copy it using bad penmanship, they used calligraphy. And Thomas Cahill wrote a book called How the Irish Saved Civilization. Read this book, it's a good one. Monks in Ireland who were illiterate, right? When the Dark Ages was going on in the mainland, they copied these manuscripts and they kept Western knowledge alive. They couldn't read, but they liked the shape of the letters. They would literally paint the letters as they would copy. And so Gutenberg invents movable type, and what is that all about? He was a goldsmith, and you make the letter sort of like you're doing gold jewelry, and each letter is on a line, and you compose the type in reverse, and you print, right? Now, does that take a long time? Yeah, it's a hard thing to do, but it's a lot more efficient than copying it by hand, which is what they used to do, okay? So the printing industry revolutionized the world. It changed the world, right? What's the difference between Turkish culture and Western civilization? In Turkish culture, the calligraphers that did the Quran had a monopoly, and they went to the Pasha and made sure that no printing presses came into Turkey. And if you limit what you know to only what calligraphers can do, you're not going to know a whole lot. So printing, books, revolutionized. We read books. We read books, we think about books, we talk about books, we publish books. Very important. So small printing houses popped up all over, especially northern Germany. Leipzig and Strasbourg became centers for printing. Who are some people that lived during his lifetime? Well, Leonardo da Vinci does the Mona Lisa in 1503. Machiavelli writes The Prince. It's a practical book about power politics. The ends justifies the means. Thomas More publishes Utopia. Utopia means topos is place, you is no place, so utopia, right? And the Reformation, 1517, Magellan circumnavigates the globe in 1521. John, you pointed out that he was killed in the Philippines by natives on the way, but his boys made it around the world. Is that a major thing? I like Columbus. He's interesting. He was only at sea for like 40 days before he got to the New World. Magellan, they were out for like 3 years, right? They lost like more than half their men, but they made it around the world. Henry VIII declares himself head of the Church of England. This is the Protestantism in England. That's 1533. Michelangelo was painting the Sistine Chapel in 1543. And Copernicus publishes about the planets and the sun, 1543. So, in other words, it's an interesting time to be alive. This is Renaissance history. What do people, all right, what do they believe in the 16th century? What happened with the Crusades? We lost the Crusades, okay? People who are Islamic say things like, Islam is backwards because of the horrible crusaders that came and killed us all, and that's why it set back classical Islamic civilization. Is that true? That's a lie, right? The Crusades are 1095 to 1281. Who won the Crusades? Islam. They drove us out of the Middle East, right? We were trying to recapture the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, the holy sites of Christ, and so pilgrims could go there. Well, we were driven out. So what happened to Islamic society? In 1258 AD, the Mongols came riding out from the steppes of Mongolia and Central Asia, and they destroyed Baghdad. What was in Baghdad? The University of Baghdad, scholars. They preserved Aristotle, Plato, Arabic, classical Arabic, algebra, mattresses, perfume, oranges, all this stuff. They destroyed classical Islamic civilization, and it never recovered. So it's not the West's fault or Christians that did it, Crusaders. No, it's the Mongols that did it. Take it up with them, okay? And so what does the Crusades have to do with it? Okay, how do you get soldiers to go on the Crusades? Well, if you go to the Crusades and if you're killed or die along the way, you get an indulgence that gets you out of purgatory. That's a pretty good deal, isn't it? And how many people died during the Crusades? Oh, about 50% of the people who went on a crusade never came back. They died of, in combat, they died of bad food, diseases, the heat, bugs, plagues, all kinds of stuff, shipwrecks, right? So to have a guaranteed ticket to heaven, this is a sweet deal. Now, when did the Crusades end? 1291. Who won? The Islamic people won. Well, did indulgences go away? No. People said, my grandfather, he was a crusader and he got an indulgence. How can I get in on that? And what did the medieval Roman Catholic Church say? Have I got a deal for you? So the indulgences idea comes from the Crusades trying to get troops. And it stayed, once you introduce a bad idea, it's hard to get rid of it. Well, that's what's going on here. So you could buy a special letter that gets out of purgatory free. Right? Again, here's Martin Luther. And he wants to his father wanted to become a lawyer. We'll talk about his father in a minute. And is that a big deal? Yeah. You want to get rich? Yeah. What do? You become a lawyer, right? So in our society, it's the same thing. You become a lawyer, you get into politics, and you make millions, right? He decided, he becomes a monk, right? And his father was deeply distressed about this because he spent a fortune on the kid's school going to Erfurt University. It's like Harvard, Princeton, and Yale in Germany. He was greatly upset over selling indulgences in the Catholic Church, and we'll talk about that in a minute. And here's this timeline, again, 1517, 508 years ago, that's why we select this date. Zwingli, he's of interest, isn't he, Patrick? He's a Swiss reformer, and he was originally a student of Luther, but he becomes a bitter opponent of him later on. Pope Leo X, I'll talk about him in a minute. Luther's Reformation. The 1524, 1525 is a huge year in the life of Luther. He gets married that year, talk about that, and the Peasants' Revolt breaks out. And here again, the timeline of Luther. Again, he was a very active individual. He wasn't like a person who, sat around and wrote books or something. He was very active in real life. Again, this shows a little map of Germany. Now, I have to explain to my college students, they don't know anything about history, but because they went to public school, they spent half the year talking about Martin Luther King Jr. I'm not kidding about this. They know nothing about history. They know about Martin Luther. They're experts on Martin Luther King Jr. Martin Luther King Jr. is not the same as Martin Luther. Martin Luther is the fat German guy that drinks a lot of beer. Martin Luther is the African-American civil rights reformer. So the big difference here, okay? They're only 500 years off. And I explained in the sermon yesterday, Martin Luther King, his real name isn't Martin Luther King, right? His last name is King, but his first name, I think he's Michael or something. Well, where did he get the name Martin Luther King? His father, Martin Luther King Sr., went to a Baptist International Conference in Germany, in Berlin in 1930, and he visited Wittenberg, and he was so impressed by what Martin Luther did, liberating people, right, that he took the name Martin Luther as his name. Martin Luther King Sr. is named after the Martin Luther. But don't get them mixed up. People do this all the time. They say to me, "Hey, Pastor Mark, yes, you're a Lutheran minister, aren't you?" "Yes, I am." "Are there a lot of black people in your church?" I say, "Well, I wish there were. Why do you ask that?" "But didn't Martin Luther King found your church?" I mean, they say this to me, right? They have to get to know me a while before they ask the embarrassing question, though, right? So people are ahistorical. They have no concept. So this is why we're talking about 508 years ago, not 1968. For them, it's the same thing, okay? All right, so Martin Luther King Jr., right? Okay, here's our Martin Luther. Notice, he's a fat guy. He's a white guy. He's a German guy. And people have done studies on estimating IQs, which is always a dangerous thing because they didn't have IQ tests back in Luther's time. But Luther is judging his literary output. He wrote 40 hymns, he organized, he did all kinds of stuff. They estimate his IQ. So the top 4 IQs, right, are Martin Luther, Johann Wolfgang von Goethe, who wrote Faust, and he's an Enlightenment philosopher and scientist, interesting guy. John Stuart Mill, who wrote On Liberty. He wrote Principles of Economics in 1848. That was like the premier economics book in the 19th century. He lived in London at the same time that Karl Marx lived in London, and they never met. John Stuart Mill didn't know anything about him. John Stuart Mill worked for the British East India Company as a bureaucrat, and he got paid for doing nothing, so he wrote economics books during that time. Marx had nothing to do with him. They didn't know anything about each other. It was a very strange thing. Now this is Emanuel Swedenborg, very interesting character, son of a Lutheran bishop, and he was a metallurgy engineer person and inventor. He invented like a flying machine, like a glider that would work. You know, they've actually built models of it. There's a model of it in the Smithsonian Institute. And so the top 4 IQs are, you know, Goethe, Luther, John Stuart Mill, and Emanuel Swedenborg. Interesting people, okay? This is not modern. We don't count Einstein. That's 20th century stuff. Okay, who are some of the people involved here? Martin Luther, of course. Charles V, the Holy Roman Emperor. We'll talk about him in a minute. Elector Frederick of Saxony. He's one of the 7 electors that get to vote for who the next emperor is. And Pope Leo X. What's his name anyway? Giovanni de' Medici. Well, what does that mean? Well, in Italian power politics in the Renaissance, the Medici family, they were heavy hitters. So he's either the grandson or the son of Lorenzo de' Medici, right? So, in other words, is he a religious person? Not really. If you have like a second or third son who's a blithering idiot, you make him into a priest or something. And, you know, you appoint him cardinal when he's like 14 years old, and he becomes the pope, right? Is he religious? No. We tend to think of popes as like religious people. It's like, no. These people, they lead our troops into battle. They have like girlfriends and boyfriends on the side. They're drunken orgies. It's like a total depravity, right? So Pope Leo is one of these. He says, God gave us the papacy, let us enjoy it. So he's like a hedonist, okay? And what is he doing? He's trying to remodel and build St. Peter's, the Vatican. So what does that mean? It takes a lot of money. You have to hire Raphael and Michelangelo, and that's a lot of money. So he needs money in order to have wars on his neighboring kingdoms in Italy. Italy is divided into 10 different kingdoms. So he's always fighting against the Pope, always fighting against, and you need money to renovate the Vatican. Okay? Sort of like Trump tearing down the ballroom, you know? You're going to build a ballroom. Well, he's paying for it through his own money and donations. Well, Pope Leo is paying for it with your money, German peasants. And it's a neuralgic issue. And did the Germans appreciate this? Germans are hardworking people who are thrifty, and they like their own country. And they resented deeply that money, good German money, is being sent to Italy to fund this kind of extravagant nonsense, right? So it's like a nationalistic opponent to the Reformation. And Hans and Marguerite Luther, that's his parents, and Catherine of Weimar, that's his wife. So these are some of the people we're going to be talking about. Okay, 1517, October 31st. What is it? Oh, that's Halloween, isn't it? The second biggest holiday since Christmas. People are all excited about it, right? Well, it's October 31st is an important date, 508 years ago. Why? It's All Hallows Eve. The next day is All Saints' Day. All Saints' Day is what? A holy day of obligation. At this time, everybody is Roman Catholic. Remember this in Western Europe? And what do you call people who aren't Roman Catholics? Jews and heretics. They burn you at the stake if you're not a Roman Catholic. Right? So there's no choice. You can't say, well, I'd rather not go to Mass today. No. You're a student, you're at the university, you go to Mass along with the professors and everyone else. Okay? So it's a holy day of obligation. And All Saints' Day, right? Very important day. And what do they do in Europe? It's a beautiful thing. You go visit the graves of your ancestors and you decorate their graves and put a candle and maybe even have a picnic and you kind of remember them. I think that's kind of a nice thing we should bring that back again. And Luther saw a problem in the church, right? What is it? I talked about this, right? That the medieval Roman Catholic idea of being saved is you're saved, you have faith in Christ, we believe in Jesus, yeah we do, okay? It's faith plus works equals salvation. So the unknown variable in the equation is works. How many works do you have to do to make sure you're saved? Right? Is that a problem? Yeah, well, I gave money to the homeless person, and I pray the rosary, and I go to the holy days of obligation. I went on a pilgrimage one time. Is that enough to get you into heaven? No. You don't know if you've done enough works. And Luther is German. He believes it. Germans are people who believe in duty, and if you tell them, they believe it, you know. So Luther is working the program of salvation in the Middle Ages, medieval Roman Catholic. So he takes it seriously. He's not like a joke or something, right? He's like, yeah, okay. So then, do you have peace of mind? No. He's like tormented. He thinks too much. It's like, how many works do I have to do? 7, 12, 15, 1,000, 5,000? How are you saved? I believe in Christ. Everybody believes in Christ. But how many good works do you have to do? So his breakthrough is you're saved by faith alone. Faith is the root. Good works is the fruit. Cause and effect. Because Jesus died for you, therefore, what do? Good works. You live like a Christian, in other words. It's not, if you do good works, then you go to heaven. You hear this all the time. He was a good person. Yes, he donated his old clothes and dirty socks to the Salvation Army, and he got a tax credit. Therefore, he's going to heaven. Well, are we saved by good work? Not really. You're not saved by being a good person. You're saved by faith in Christ, and because Jesus died for you, therefore, you do good things. You're a good neighbor, a good citizen, a solid, dependable person, right? Very important. So, Luther posted 95 theses on the door of the Wittenberg church, criticisms of the church. And within 2 weeks, thousands of copies it's written in Latin, and they translate it into German and then French, and they published it. Printers looking for content, right? Today, you have a website, they want content. Within 2 weeks, he's a celebrity all across Northern Europe. It went viral, in other words. That's how we would say it. Here he is as a monk, Augustinian hermit monk. Great picture of him. Okay? Educated by brethren to common life. So was Erasmus of Rotterdam. It's kind of an early Renaissance way of getting right with God and studying the Bible. He studied, educated in the law. Again, who else is educated in the law? John Calvin. Okay? And lawyers have a way of thinking, a systematic way of thinking and putting things down on paper. So Luther's like that. He has a systematic mind. He's ordained in 1507. He traveled to Rome in 1510. I'll talk about that in a little bit. and he became a spiritual leader in the monastery and in the city of Wittenberg, where he was an Old Testament professor. Again, this is lifetime of Luther, right? The word Protestant, it means the Diet of Speyer in 1529 was a meeting with the Holy Roman Emperor, and they were basically given an ultimatum: you have to believe in the Catholic Church, you have to renounce Protestant or Lutheranism, or you're going to be heretics. And the Lutheran princes, the electors, got up and stormed out of the meeting. They protested the ruling of the Pope and of the Holy Roman Emperor. So we're called Protestant ones, Protestants, right? And the Reformation is a reform movement, reform at the hard drive, right? And it's outside of the Catholic Church. Luther was excommunicated by the Pope. So what does non-Roman Catholic Christianity look like? That's what Luther was trying to envision. And of course, did it spur a reaction? What happened on December 7, 1941? The Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor. What did they think? They thought that we Americans are fat and lazy and corrupt and weak, and that we were going to sue for peace because we've been bested by the superior Japanese. And so what happened? It took about a year and a half, and we industrialized into high gear. We built more battleships, more tanks, more men. 14 million people are in the military in World War II, and we crushed the Empire of Japan. It took a few years to do, but that's what big bureaucracies or big institutions, it takes them a while to get the momentum. Same thing with the Counter-Reformation. If Pope Leo would have stepped up and dealt with Luther immediately in 1517, there would be no problem. They didn't. They didn't know what to do. Leo didn't take Luther seriously. He says, it's a squabble among monks. So in other words, it's an argument between the Dominican order and the Augustinian hermit order. Who cares? I'm going drinking and hunting for wild boars. So, and it took them maybe 100 years for the Counter-Reformation to really kick in. And who do we know who's the leader of the Counter-Reformation? St. Ignatius of Loyola, founder of the Jesuit order, the shock troops of the Counter-Reformation. Okay, so it took them a while, but when they came around, it was with a vengeance. Here's Luther burning the papal bull of excommunication. In Wittenberg, it's a big thing in German history, and these are like highlights of Luther's life. In Germany, they don't sit around talking about how great was Heinrich Himmler, or wasn't Hitler a swell guy? They look back at people like Martin Luther and they go, he's like George Washington, he's like the founder of the German nation. So they celebrate and they learn about Luther, even if you're not Lutheran. You could be Roman Catholic or even an atheist. So Luther is an important person in German history. And this is his father Hans, who is a peasant, a miner, and he saved enough money to become an entrepreneur. And so he owned smelter. They smelted copper, right? So he's a miner. They mine copper and smelt it. So he is a self-made man who made a lot of money. And what did he want to do? He wanted to make sure that his son didn't have to get into the mining industry. Obviously, his kid's intelligent, so what do? You send him to Erfurt University, which is like the Harvard, Princeton, and Yale of Germany at the time. Cost a lot of money, like, I don't know, $80,000 a year, room, board, and tuition, that kind of thing. Big money. And Hans is willing to pay for it. Why? Do they have Social Security in Germany? No. Do they have a retirement program? No. What do? You help your son become successful so that they can take care of you in your old age when you can't work in the mines anymore. Okay? So he's investing in his own future by sending his kid off to college, and he wants him to be a lawyer. Okay? He wants him to be a lawyer. This is his mother. We don't know a whole lot about his mother. She's kind of like a quiet woman in the background. But we know a lot about Hans. Hans was crushed and devastated when Luther left the university and became a monk. And here it is. This is the smelting industry. They're working away, coal mining. Again, it must have been hard, nasty, filthy work. Here he is, born in Eisleben. He's born in Eisleben. Father's a miner. He goes to Erfurt University, and he gets a BA in 1502 and a master's degree in law in 1505. So he was not a dummy. He was well educated. And his undergraduate years, we would say high school, he was educated in the 7 liberal arts, so he's able to read Latin and Greek before he begins a university. Lectures are in Latin. Enters law school. Okay, this is a turning point in the life of Luther. July 2nd, 1505, he went to Mansfield to visit his father. He's walking 65 miles back to Erfurt again. It's July, hellacious thunderstorms, right? They're known for this. So he's out in the country in the wide open, and there's a thunderstorm. And lightning is striking all over the place. It's terrifying. And what causes lightning anyway? Well, we watch the History Channel, so we know about this. It's a static discharge and all. What causes lightning in the Middle Ages? God or the gods are angry. Thor is throwing down lightning bolts on you to try to kill you because you're some kind of sinner. Okay? So he thinks it's an act of God, and he's trembling in fear. Now, why is he trembling in fear? He's 21, 22, 23 years old, and he's been at the University of Wittenberg. 2 of his buddies from law school, classmates, died of the plague. They're fine one day, a couple days later, they're dead. Does that tend to mess up the way you think? Yeah. And earlier, a couple years earlier, Luther had a sword, a student sword. Hey, what does that mean? When you walk into the town like Erfurt, there's the townies against the gownies. So the townies are, like redneck thugs, and they beat up on the college students. They rob you, they kill you, they don't. So what do you have to do? You have to carry a dagger with you to defend yourself in the streets. They don't have police, right? So this dagger shifted over and cut Luther's own leg. And he was in a field out in the country at the time, and his friends had to run back to town to get the doctor because he was bleeding out. And here he is laying in the field, and what is he doing? Thinking. What is he thinking about? Death. Right? His own mortality. And the doctor comes, they stitch him up, they put him in bed, and guess what happens again? It opens up again, he starts bleeding again. He thinks he's going to die. And guess what? He didn't die. God spared him from this. And so here he is again in a situation where he could die at any second. He could be fried alive by thunder. So what does he do? He falls on his face and he says, "Help me, St. Anne, I'll become a monk." Now, is that an odd thing? Why would you say that? Well, because St. Anne, who is the mother of Jesus, mother of Mary, is the patron of minors. So St. Anne is like the family saint. So he's calling on the family saint to save him from death. And what did he promise to do?
Become a monk.
Now, most of us, if we made a vow to God, God, get me out of this one, I'll never do it again. Because we forget about that. He's German now. What do Germans do? They're big into vows. Okay? When Hitler knew this, and so he makes you take an absolute vow to Hitler, and Germans believe vows. They don't go back on their vow. That's a huge thing, okay, in German history. So he said it, and guess what? He's going to do it. So within 2 weeks, he has a farewell party with his friends, and he gives away a rare book, 1,000-page book. It's the Corpus of the Law, and it's worth like maybe $20,000 in our money. Okay, it's the Justinian Code. That's the law, the book you study when you go to law school. He gave it away to his friends, and his friends were trying to talk him out of it. He goes to the Augustinian hermit monastery. They're the Marines of the monks in the Middle Ages. He goes there, and he becomes a novice, and they invite you in, they ask you questions to make sure you're serious or not, and then you take vows to become an Augustinian hermit. Now, what does that mean? It's like checking into, maybe like a prison, like Dannemora. It's like prison upstate New York. Would that be a good place to live? It has a wall around it, so you're safe from the outside world, but guess what? You have to sleep in a cell, like you do in a monastery, and you sleep on the cement floor with a blanket, and there's a peephole where they can keep an eye on you, and you're not allowed to eat you're not allowed to talk during meals. So you have to sit there in silence. You get up at 2 o'clock in the morning, you pray the 150 Psalms, it takes 2.5 weeks to sing the Psalms, and then you start all over again. It's like being in prison. And they do a tonsure, they shave the back of your head. Why do they do that? In case you escape from the monastery, they could see your bald head popping through the crowd and they could pick you out and find you, right? So it's like being in a penitentiary. He gave up his career, his academic career, and all of his friends to become a monk, to check yourself into Dannemora prison. That's what he's doing here. So his friends thought he was crazy, right? And his father was livid, right? I spent all this money on you to go to Erfurt, and you're going to become a monk? And what happens if you become a monk? It's like joining the French Foreign Legion. They give you a new name, right? Your old life is gone, and you're a non-person as a part of this brotherhood that you're in. You become an inmate with a number, basically. Amazing stuff. Here's Stoderheim. This is the place in the country where he was walking, and if you go to Germany now, they have a granite obelisk set up, and it says, "Help me, Saint Anne, become a monk." And here is the lightning strike, right? Again, he thought he was going to die. Yeah, help me, Saint Anne. And here, she's the mother, the legendary mother of Mary. And here it is, again, it's terrifying if you've ever been out in a storm before. He thinks he's going to die. And here he is checking into the monastery. And they're Augustinians, so that means they read a lot of St. Augustine, Bishop of Hippo. And what's his famous book, The City of God? Read it. Patrick, this is for you. This is a complete education in the transition from the Roman Empire to the Middle Ages. So he makes fun of the Roman pantheon of gods, and he also presents the positive argument for Christianity. Very, very important book. It's one of the great books of the Western world. Forget religion, right? But it happens to be a very religious book, right? So the order is named after St. Augustine, and they read the works of St. Augustine. Here, these are Augustinian monks, and the current pope is an Augustinian. So they still wear the black robes. So it's an active order. Remember, how do you understand the Catholic Church? You take an umbrella, the peak, the top of the umbrella is the Pope, and there are these little ribs that come down. Each rib represents an order. Dominicans, Marist brothers, Paulist brothers, Jesuits, right? Franciscans, Dominicans, right? So they have their own theology. They're Catholic under the Pope, but they have their own, and their theology is as different as Lutherans are from Methodists or Presbyterians, but they all have one thing in common: that's the Pope is the top of the heap. Very interesting. So Catholic orders, you could do a whole history on just studying the theology of the different orders, right? Here it is. This is still there. I visited here twice. This is the Augustinian Hermit Monastery in Erfurt, and that's the gate, wink wink, that Luther checked in when he became a monk. You leave the world and you check into a wall, it's like a penitentiary. And it was heavily damaged during World War II, and the library is a hole in the ground, and 217 people in Erfurt were hiding in the basement of the library, and a bomb hit right on top of the library and blew it up and killed them all, right? So a lot of Germany is heavily bombed, but Germans are good at cleaning up and rebuilding. So it looks good. They try to make it look the way it did. If you go down the block, this is in the old Eastern Eastern Germany. Down the block, there's like burnt out buildings from World War II because the communists didn't rebuild anything in East Germany. They took all the valuable stuff and sent it back to Russia, but they didn't spend any money rebuilding things. But since 1989, the fall of the Berlin Wall, the West Germans resent having to pay money to the East Germans, who are lazy after being communists for 75 years, and they don't have a work ethic. They pay their tax money to rebuild these places, right? So this one, the monastery itself, is a UNESCO site, a World Heritage Site, and it's very important. And who visited here? Pope Benedict, a couple of popes ago, visited here, which is kind of interesting. Yeah, this is a cloister, right? So when you pray, you walk down the hallway here, this cloister, and what's in the courtyard? That's where the monks are buried. You know, when you die, they dig a hole and you bury you. You're anonymous. You're buried with all the brothers since like 1297 or something. So there's like, who knows how many people are buried in the courtyard there. All right, these are his degrees, right? Who's this? This is Johann von Tetzel. He's a Dominican and what Dominicans? Order of Preachers, OP, Order of Preachers, right? So Dominicans wear black and white, they look like the penguins, and they're out there, and he got a commission from the Pope to sell indulgences, okay? So he gets a commission, and so he goes around telling people, that if you buy this indulgence, guess what? You can get out of purgatory. In 1510, Luther goes to Rome. He's sent there on Augustinian hermit business. He goes to Rome, and he loves the church. He's been dreaming about going to Rome his entire life. He gets to Rome, and what does he find out? That it's a corrupt cesspool, right? There are priests that they're drunken frequenter of prostitutes, they're gamblers, they're filthy, nasty people, and they say the Mass, and they say it as fast as they can, because you have to say Mass once a day if you're a priest. And Luther was saying Mass in Rome, which is a high honor, and the priest behind him was like making fun of him because he was saying it too slow. You're supposed to say it fast, get it over with. So Luther was crushed, right? Imagine having high hopes, oh, the U.S. Constitution, the Washington, D.C., the Capitol building, oh, the White House, I want to go and see the Supreme Court, I want to go see it all, and you find out that they're all a bunch of crooks. It's devastating to you. Well, that's him, okay? He's like a wounded lover, right? Speedy masses. If there was a hell, Rome was built on it. Rome, once the holiest city, is now the worst, right? So he was very disillusioned with what he saw at Rome. Here he is going up the stairs. Supposedly these are the steps that Christ walked on. So if you go up the steps, you get time off of indulgences and purgatory. You get time off of purgatory. So he's going up the steps with all these pilgrims. Of course, you have to pay money for this. Pilgrims in Rome at the height of the Renaissance, right? They're doing all this stuff. Luther is disgusted and overwhelmed by the extravagance. Again, Germans like things plain and efficient. We don't like the Italian curlicues with gold leaf on top of it, right? Baroque architecture is an offense to Germans. And here he is. He walked the whole way. And this is Wittenberg, a little town, about 2,000 people, and it had a university in it. And this is the center of Wittenberg, right? Still there today. I took these pictures. And there's a statue of Martin Luther here at the town square. That's called the Rathaus. That's like the town hall. And that's St. Mary's Church in the background there. And these are the streets. And this is in the old East Germany. So there are actually places where there's bomb damage from World War II, and they just left it. There's like a building, like a butcher shop or something, and they could see the sign, right? And there's like a hole in the ground with all burnt stuff. They'd left it that way. And Lucaria, it means White Mountain in Greek. So that's the name of Wittenberg University. And here's again St. Mary's Church, medieval Roman Catholic. Remember, the medieval Roman is different than the modern Catholic Church. So read the documents of Vatican II. They've accepted a lot of the reforms that Luther proposed 500 years ago. Very interesting. So medieval Roman is different than the modern Catholic Church. This is Pope, this is Rodrigo Borgia, Pope Alexander VI. He's one of the Renaissance popes. He's married with 2 girlfriends and like 7 or 8 children running around the Vatican. He's like corrupt, decadent. This is the kind of stuff that, that is going on. Piles, intrigues, backstabbing, manipulation, politics. And this is a time of Henry the Navigator, who's from Portugal, they're Roman Catholic, right? And he's exploring the world. And you have to understand, the Holy Roman Empire, the Habsburgs, are based in Spain. And did the Reformation work in Spain? No, it didn't. Why is that? Because they're Catholic. How Catholic are they? From 711 to 1492, the people of the Iberian Peninsula, the Portuguese, fought the Islamic Moors. 781 years of fighting. So when Luther comes along with the Protestant Reformation, they're like, no, thank you. Ignatius of Loyola is from Pamplona, which is northern Spain, right? So these people are really Catholic. And Columbus was bankrolled by who? Ferdinand and Isabella, right? Where did they go? The New World, to find a way to China. So they had the income of South America and the Caribbean, all the silver and gold mines, funneling into Spain. So the Habsburgs were, the Holy Roman, that was like the dominant empire of the time during Luther's time. And the rivals were the French. The French and the Habsburgs hate each other. Henry the Navigator, Portugal, right? Portuguese. So in the middle of Luther's life, all of this stuff is going on. Treaty of Tordesillas, it's my Spanish students will always make fun of me because I don't pronounce it correct. It's Tordesillas, that's why I pronounce it. I'm from Minnesota, what do you want? So Pope Alexander VI, Rodrigo Borgia, his son is Cesare Borgia, Caesar Borgia, who was a maniac like Napoleon, okay? And so he divides the world into Spanish and Portuguese sections, okay? Here it is. And that's the treaty. So what language do they speak in Brazil? Portuguese. Why is that? Because the line goes north and south this way. Everything on this side of the line is Spanish. Everything on this side is Portuguese. Who got the best deal? No. The Portuguese did. Because the Pope at the time, Rodrigo Borgia, didn't like the Habsburgs, and he wanted to help the Portuguese. And what did they get out of the deal? India, right? Africa. So Columbus, he's on the other side of that line. They didn't know about, the wealth of the Incas or something, or the Aztecs. They didn't know about that. So the Portuguese got the best deal. And Portugal is they have like 2 or 3 million people in their little country. It's a little tiny country, and they controlled all this vast empire. And the Atlantic expansion's going on. Vasco da Gama is greater than Columbus in that he discovered a way around the Cape of Good Hope and made it all the way to Goya, India, and back again. Now that's something. Columbus thought he made it to the outer islands of China, India, Chinese, right? And he didn't know to the day he died that it's a new world. Very interesting. And what did Columbus bring back? He brought back some captives Indians and some parrots and a couple of gourds and that kind of. And what did Vasco da Gama? He brought back silk and spices, and he brought back gold. Who got the best deal again? The Portuguese, right? The idea is to get to India. And he fought this is Vasco da Gama's, and he fought the Islamic pirates that controlled the Arabian Sea. Vasco da Gama's, you talk about this for hours. What was the Portuguese plan? To fight Islam, okay? Columbus's plan is to fight Islam. Columbus wanted to make money so that he could bankroll a new crusade to kick the Islamic people, the Turks, out of the Holy Land. So we're still trying to get the crusades done. It's 1492. We were driven out in 1281, so it's like a captive idea. They wanted to spread Roman Catholic Christianity. Why is that? Well, how many people are in the Islamic world? Well, right now, let's do the numbers now. About 900 million, a billion people, let's say. How many Christians in the world? About 2 billion. So if you want to go to war, you need bodies, don't you, for your army? So the more people you have, the better off you are. So part of their idea is to spread Christianity to the new world, to convert these people so we have an army ready to go against the threat of Islam. Remember, Islam is a real thing now. Right? He's the Antichrist. They're coming to destroy. They want to sack Rome and destroy the Christian religion. And he wanted to secure trade. So his third thing is to make money. So when people learn about this, they don't understand that it's a war against Islam and to spread Christianity. That's the first 2 reasons, not just to make money. Money's important, right? So very interesting. This Cesare Borgia, again, maniac. He fought all these different. He led papal armies into war. He was a cardinal who then became a warlord. And this is Italy at the time of the Reformation. Italy wasn't united until 1871 either. So you have all these little combating little areas. So Italy's all divided up too. Here's the Pope, Pope Leo X. Again, he's a Medici, Giovanni de Medici, and prior to 1453, when what happened? The Turks took Constantinople, northern Italy, Florence, Venice, Milan, right? Genoa. They made a lot of money. How? They sailed around through Sicily up here to Constantinople to the Silk Road, and they got the silk and they brought it back and they sold it in markets over the Alps, and they made a ton of money. So the money center, what's the money center right now? New York and London. Well, in this time, it's Florence was the money center of the world. And what happened after 1453? They got cut off from the Silk Road. So Columbus, 1492, the Atlantic, they open up the Atlantic to get a way to go to China. So the money center then moves from Florence north of the Alps. Very, very important. Follow the money. And where did it end up? It ended up in, well, Lisbon, Seville, but Augsburg is the center. Augsburg is the money center. And who is this guy? This is Jacob Fugger, F-U-G-G-A-R. Who is he? You've heard of David Rockefeller or Bill Gates or Warren Buffett. You've heard of people like this? Jacob Fugger was like 50 times richer than any of these people. Bill Gates, Steve Jobs, all the filthy. And why? Because he lent money to who? People like the Holy Roman Emperor. You need money in order to go to war? He's the banker, right? He's one of the richest people that have ever lived. Jacob Fugger in Augsburg. Here he is. And he charged interest and all that sort of thing. And of course, he's Roman Catholic, right? So he lent money to the Pope, he lent money to the Holy Roman Emperor, and here's Giovanni de' Medici, the Pope. And again, he's not religious in any way. He's like a frat boy, right? On spring break. Okay, and what's an indulgence? Again, indulgence means that you get out of purgatory, okay? And again, how do you get troops to be in the Crusades? Promise them an indulgence. Then when the Crusades ended, how do we get in on it? Indulgence, 7 sacraments. This is 1215 in the Catholic Church. They defined what 7 sacraments are. Again, is that in the book of Acts? No, it's 1215, right? So Luther says, no, there's only 2 sacraments, baptism and Lord's Supper. They're not 7 sacraments. See how that works? Principle, you can't undo a sacrament. So, is marriage a sacrament? Yes, it is, according to Catholic law, canon law, right? Well, then can you say, I want to get divorced? You can't undo a sacrament, right? That's like a law, right? How about baptism? Can you undo your baptism? No, you can't. So, why is that important? Well, if you can't undo a sacrament, you can't unbaptize yourself. What do you do with Tony Soprano? Is he baptized Catholic? Yeah, he is. From Sicily, he's baptized Catholic, New Jersey, right? So what do you do with him? Well, we know what happened to him. I think when the series ended, he's sitting in the restaurant in New Jersey, and there's like hitman in the background, and they ended it. People think that he was like killed in the restaurant, assassinated. So where is he now? He's in purgatory, because you can't undo a sacrament. You can't say he wasn't really baptized. No, he's a criminal who was baptized, but he did all kinds of horrible stuff. So he's in purgatory. Okay, so how do you, if you really love your Uncle Tone, what do? You buy indulgences. Purgatory is a solution to the problem. What do you do with baptized people who went the wrong way? You put them in purgatory until their sins are purged, and then they go to heaven. So that works? It's actually a brilliant thing. It came up in the Middle Ages. They thought this up. So then the Pope has the key to purgatory called the Treasury of Merits. So the Pope is allowed to give you a letter, a indulgence, to get you or your loved ones out of heaven or out of purgatory to get them into heaven. Okay? So if you make a donation, you get this impressive certificate. I must admit, it looks better than my diplomas that I got. Right? It's pretty impressive, right? You can post that in your wall. And here they are, indulgence sale. Right? So they actually went from town to town, and they'd have a big show, you know, some entertainment, and the next thing you know, they want you to buy an indulgence. And they explain how, you know, your Uncle Fred, who you love, is in purgatory roasting right now. And you can relieve his suffering by just donating $100 to Pasadena, California. Right? Your sins are forgiven. So this is the indulgence controversy. And so Pope Leo approved this. Why? He needed money to fund the armies and to fund the remodeling of St. Peter's. So indulgences, nepotism, they appoint their simony, they sell their offices, they sell forgiveness of sins, they hold multiple offices, so you're a cardinal here and you're a monsignor over here. And they would be in charge of a parish and never show up. No-show jobs, you know, for the mafia, right? So in other words, there's all kinds of corruption going on. And these are relics, okay? So what's Luther's problem? He posts the 95 Theses because he objects to the sale of indulgences, right? It's not in the Bible. You can't do this. No, I object. And what is the point? He wrote it in Latin, okay? Here's Johannes Tetzel going around selling. They're selling it like in Staatsburg, like they're around town here. And he's a Dominican, and he got a commission. And his slogan, as soon as the coin of the coffer rings, another soul from purgatory springs. He even had an advertising jingle. A little catchy tune to go with it. Dominican friar, he's making a commission. He's growing rich on the commission of selling indulgences to the ignorant German peasants who believe it and buy it. There's Tetzel selling. Of course, he's fat. He's a fat guy, you know. He's not... Peasants are skinny because they work all the time, but he's like a fat guy because he drinks beer and he lives large. And here he is, Tetzel. That's his slogan. Again, here he is, Life of Tetzel. Here's an indulgence. So Luther objects, and he posted 95, when? On October 31st, the day before All Saints' Day, because it's a holy day of obligation. All the students have to go to Mass that day. So, you know, I think maybe we'll end here. So this is part one. I guess I'll do part two next week. Just to introduce the subject. So, all right. I try to make this an hour, but it's hard with this much material. Anybody have any questions or anything? It's a lot of material.
No, the Newton came later.
Yeah, well, that's another whole thing. Copernicus was a Lutheran, and using the idea that God created the heaven and the earth and we honor God by studying his creation. That's a Protestant idea. And you know, Galileo's famous problems with the Catholic Church were that he was challenging the Aristotelian view that the earth is the center of the cosmos. And you can't, if you challenge Aristotle, then you're going to mess up the whole system, the whole Roman Catholic system.